A system that once was built to protect us is now responsible for millions of deaths. I had them put into my own body because we couldn't legitimately find a candidate who could have taken a risk like that. The United States is losing its innovation factor. They're demanding 3.2 million euros. This is a game. That's a very unfair game.
Here with Liz Parrish of BioViva. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know everybody wants to talk to you, so thank you. But tell us a little bit about you, your company, how you got started, your enthusiasm for this. Tell me.
Well, I guess I'll talk about how I got started. In 2013, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I had already spent 2 years in the regenerative medicine space on a platform for the advocacy of the use of stem cells. So I had seen that there was great movement in the space. I was learning about epigenetics, why every cell in the body has the same genes, but some have the propensity to regenerate your body, like stem cells. And I kind of fell in love with genetics during that project. When my son was diagnosed, I saw that these technologies don't translate to the people who need them most. And in this case, it was kids. So I started traveling, looking for curative medicine for kids, and I ran into some aging research. And at first, I wasn't sure how this would fit, but after a few days of really good jet lag and being immersed in the conference, I started to make the connections. The genes that we work with as a company, all of them will treat both young people with diseases and the elderly. And that, once I made that connection, you kind of have to put things into perspective. It's very, very hard to do any sort of experimental medicine with children, even if they were going to die without it. It's hard to get access. It's usually done through children's hospitals. But the same genes that can help them can help an aging population. And what we can do is expedite curative medicine to those children by using consenting adults. And so we have the ability to really speed up biomedical research through human data instead of the animal data that we typically use, that it's non-predictive of how humans will actually interact with a new drug. And that's kind of where the story started. And then out of that came my company, BioViva.
Okay, so is that um, your child's diagnosis with type 1 diabetes? Was that after your thesis in college with Best Choice Medicine that involved Bill Andrews, or is that?
No, actually, that came later. So
Okay.
when I started BioViva, we basically started the company taking the first gene therapies in the world to treat biological aging. And I had them put into my own body because we couldn't legitimately find a candidate who could have taken a risk like that. One of the gene therapies was telomerase reverse transcriptase, and it had never been used in a human. And so it came with the higher risk of unknown, and the other one was follistatin. And we had done a lot of reading, and we thought these two gene therapies together would be super synergistic. So we, not being able to find a candidate, I did that myself. And that created a lot of, I would say, media attention that we weren't ready for. And one of the critiques of myself was that I wasn't educated enough to lead a company. And so I'm a solutionist. So I said, well, then I'll get my MBA and I'll do a thesis. I did my MBA, this is kind of weird, in global management. Change management, but at a global scale, because at that time we were a very global economy. We've kind of become more insular as countries since then. But my thesis, I went completely off the rails to what I wanted, which was regulation.
Okay.
And so I remember I turned my thesis into George Church to show him what I had done, and he emailed back like 3 words, and one of them was bold. But I did get it passed, and of course it was completely unique, but it really was, after spending years in this industry and having a difficulty getting medicine to people. And so, when you see a problem, you got to solve a problem, but you got to create credibility around that problem. So actually doing my thesis in regulations and on what I thought was the solution for the problem was the right thing to do in this case.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, moving forward to now, what are you working on in BioViva? What's the research you're working on?
So now, so we started with AAV gene therapy, and we studied 4 gene therapies. We have the most human data in the world in regenerative gene therapies in humans. And so what we did is we started to take that data and translate that out to companies. So now we license that technology out to different places in the world where they can legally use this technology or go through phase 1 clinical studies. And then in the meantime, in 2018 or 19, we started working with Rutgers University on cytomegalovirus as a new delivery method because it can deliver more genetic material, it doesn't integrate, and it was redosable. We can redose AAV. We have a protocol. We can show increased protein expression, but it is harder to do because people build up antibodies, whereas CMV gives us a fresh slate, getting more genes in. So instead of having to pay for 6 gene therapies, you would just pay for 1. So we've really been trying to work on getting the price of gene therapy to an affordable price point, which is a very difficult thing to do when you can only deliver 1 gene or very small genes in one delivery method.
Okay, so I'm noticing a trend here. Going back in the day when you had to try those things on yourself because you couldn't find a candidate. I'm guessing that has something to do with you weren't allowed to use other candidates because there was no other trials. And then moving into, today, you've got the issues you had just said. So is that one of the bigger challenges you have is being able to meet regulations to be able to carry on what you need to do?
There are places popping up in the world that have new regulations, and we've worked with governments in some of those locations, and we're really happy about that. But what we'd really like to do is get drugs on track in the United States. Um, the United States is losing its innovation factor. There's a lot happening in research, probably less so now with funding cuts. But we need to translate medicine to humans. And what we're seeing is all over the world, other countries are willing to do so. China, the Middle East, countries that we were ahead of are now going ahead of us. And they're funding companies to go through those clinical trials instead of, making small companies get investment from the private sector until they can't get it anymore, having to get bought out by big pharma and really never being able to see their drug finished in their own hands with their own design that they had for the future of that drug. And that has to change because the original stakeholders are the ones that want most for those drugs to be in humans, be safe as possible, and be effective.
Okay, so would you say that's the biggest thing you run into as well as having to outsource to other countries to get it?
Absolutely. So we have licensing partners now all over the world in those zones where they can use the technology, and we can't really do anything here. We've taken human data to the U.S. FDA. We took a 5-person dementia study that had outstanding data, and they just told us to go back and do like $8 million more animal studies, which made
Wow.
no sense to us, and it doesn't make sense to patients who actually need these drugs.
And is that because the research was done outside of the US? So even though you brought the data to them, they
No, I think they just really wanna kill you in the valley of death, you know? They want you to have to do all of these, biodistribution studies and everything in animal models, large animal models that cost a ton of money. I mean, then you never really get to the finish line, right? I mean, if you already have human data and you've already used a safe dose and you've shown that it's non-toxic and it actually helps people who eventually don't even know who they are, I mean, to me, a system that once was built to protect us is now is responsible for millions of deaths.
wow. Okay. And how does funding play into that? Is that a challenge you run into as well? I know funding and regulation kind of go hand in hand because one's high, the other's high.
Well, it is really difficult right now. Generally, investors go for whatever the new shiny thing is, and probably the most important thing for them is to extend their lifespan so that they can invest more and make more money down the road. But things like AI and other things that will be beneficial to biology eventually, they've cut out in front of us. Regulations are so high in this country that investors don't want to invest because the failure rate is high. And the failure rate in cell therapy and gene therapy is much lower, very much lower. As a matter of fact, if you can get a gene therapy into the US FDA, it's the fastest regulated approval in the world. It takes less than 6 years to get a drug through because the drug is delivered by your own cells. Your cells become the drug factory, and they can regulate that product or kill themselves if they think they're making too much or if they think they're unhealthy. And so it takes the whole middleman of drug development out. It's a very succinct and exact technology. So it gets approved very quick if it can get in. But most investors are used to the $2.4 billion. And what usually kills the gene therapy companies specifically is you ask for the money, then the US FDA sends you back for more and more animal studies, and now you're through 15, $20 million, and you haven't even touched a human. People don't want to put up that type of cash. We need a new way.
Yeah, and that also, the timeline of that, of having to spend years or decades going through the FDA regulation, even if you do have the cash to go through that, a return on investment, you're looking at 10, 20, 30 years, which is too long of a timeline for an investor to wait on a return.
Well, and they've done more than that. When you get done, you start to assess the what the price of the therapy should be with the regulators, and they have made drugs that are too expensive for most people to actually afford. So the gene therapies are now the most expensive drug on the planet. And I mean, we're trying to get several patients funded to get US approved gene therapies. I've got a family, they've got a child with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. He's going to be in a wheelchair pretty soon.
Mm.
He qualifies for the gene therapy, but they're demanding 3.2 million euros, which is
Wow.
3.6 or more million dollars, or else they won't treat him.
Wow.
And so this is a game that's a very unfair game. If we use the same type of genetic therapies and we treat adults, these children would just get treatments for free. It would just be like a byproduct of already making gene therapies. You just put a new gene into the cassette, you treat them, cure them, and you can continue to serve the greatest population, which is biological aging. So we've done it sort of backwards, and we need to get back on track. I mean, it's absolutely critical for everyone, including these children, that we get back on track.
It seems like the simplest concept, and you think that would, as soon as you say it once, everyone would be like, "Yeah, that's what needs to happen," and it happens.
I
So,
know.
but how do you see it possible to get to that, what you just explained as reality? What needs to happen? What roadblocks need to be pulled out of the way? What needs to change to make that real?
Well, we need the pre-regulatory on-ramp. We need something that's decoupled from the US FDA. The US FDA wants safer looking drugs. They don't clearly know how to deal with these more precise medicines with less side effects. So let's help them. Let's create a pre-regulatory route. Let's help terminally ill patients get access first. There's no question about whether they need it. As we show safety and efficacy in those patients, let's move it back and open it up to healthy patients. Then, as each one of these drugs off ramps, it can off ramp into the US FDA, which is only really able to take in drugs that they think are reasonably safe, even though they have approved 10 of the most dangerous drugs in the world.
Okay.
So, it's like we have to we have to get out of the mantras, and we need to start taking this into our own hands and our own thinking, because when people say things to you that you can't deny. Here's a statement from the US FDA. Drugs should be proven safe before being used in humans. Again, they have approved 10 of the most dangerous drugs all the way through regulatory system. They pull drugs all the time that go through that system. So we can't say that that gold standard actually creates that. And we have to admit that somebody has to come up and take a drug first. So we can't guarantee safety there, but in the gene and cell technology, we can actually show that this is the safest technology in the world because it doesn't come with a myriad of side effects. Will things go wrong? Yeah, they probably will go wrong because, you stick a needle in someone's arm, and, if they have some sort of thrombosis, it could cause an issue that you can't foresee. So, but we can guess that by percentages, they will be much lower than these older class of drugs.
Okay. That's a very different approach from what I hear most people say with the FDA. You say use uh, pre-regulatory on-ramps, whereas most people say, get rid of the FDA.
No,
So
you
why
no,
do
you
you have your answer? What?
if the thing is that abolishing anything comes with problems. The
Okay.
US FDA was built and designed to take pharmaceuticals, vastly pills that you ingest, through to the market. And the pharmaceutical companies lobbied the US FDA to make it the most expensive route on the planet. They made it so that smaller companies couldn't do business with them, especially not by phase 3, so pharma would get to buy any of those companies that it wanted at that stage. I say we leave pharma with FDA. Just leave them with it. They can pay those charges. And these new drugs come with a new on ramp. And if they choose to go through FDA for even a broader path, then they should. But if they get through the pre regulatory path, they should be open to right to try because it has met the standards of a phase 1 clinical study. So then, right to try is approved in every state in the United States. That gives all of those states access to those as actionable drugs for a variety of different downstream effects that they could be basically put on a leaderboard for. And then you take a country that is now falling behind in medicine and you put it in the front. It is in the front.
Okay. So this is actually really interesting, coupled with the approach we're taking with Immortalis, especially in the US. What we're trying to do is we recognize no administration, even the current one who wants to get rid of everything, is going to allow just, here's a piece of land, do whatever you want. We're not going to say anything. So there's going to have to be some coordination with FDA and other agencies.
Well,
And so,
there's actually agencies that sit above the US FDA, and if you read my paper, you'll see that you can actually couple in with them. You don't have to couple in with the FDA, and you can have rigorous science and ethics boards that are actually more qualified for gene therapy and cell therapy than the US FDA. So then you actually have a safer route. So what you would do is you would be rebuilding, and maybe it's more than rebuilding, maybe eventually it replaces. But we don't have to then get into that actionable debate in the United States whether the FDA should be abolished because then that comes with consequences as well. They
okay.
do oversee the most dangerous drugs in the world.
Yeah.
So they should probably be stuck with doing that.
Right, that does make sense.
Always stick people with what they want to do.
Yeah. So, as far as a US-based Immortalis goes, should that come through, which we're very bullish it will, we would be working with whichever agencies. I don't remember them offhand, but you are right. There are other agencies involved that we would be working with as well. And uh, the point would be fast-tracked approval ratings, or
Mhm.
not ratings, but processes.
Mhm.
And that seems kind of what you're saying with the on ramps. It's
Yeah.
not pre regulatory, but it is focused on, okay, within this border, within this zone, these people get priority and fast tracked approval. So it's almost like the same kind of on ramp you're talking about. And
Mhm.
then the way we see this going, and it seems proven in other industries around the world, that when you reduce that regulation and streamline that, it's going to speed up the timeline of getting through trial. It's going to make more things able to finish going through trials through all three phases, which is going to shorten return on investment and make it a better bet for investors. So that's going to increase investment, which is going to speed things up even more because then more companies can get involved. And
Yes,
it seems like a
absolutely.
synergistic win.
Yeah.
So, what do you have to say on that as far as what we are doing, just creating the zone so people like you can come in? Uh,
Well, I mean, it's really powerful if you can take investment money and you can use a fraction of it to get the same results. And you can. So, you don't have to hire these really expensive CDMOs and all of this register and everything else in order to do a very efficient, thoroughly well done study. And I think that what we see in the gene therapy space is when you take at least the companies that we work with offshore, they're responsible, they're using the actual science, they're getting actual results, and they are responsible. So they work within responsible limits. They basically avoid any toxicity issues. They work very diligently to deliver a good product and have a good outcome, because a bad outcome would be very bad for them. And those companies need to still hold that responsibility in the United States. Whereas in the United States in gene therapy, we have seen what, 6 children die just in the last 24 months of known toxic doses of gene therapy because the US FDA said they could do it. That's not acceptable. You can't just say, "Oh, my dad said I could, so therefore I'm gonna knock out your windows." You know? That's not the way it should work, and so really when the companies have that responsibility of clinical outcome, I think that that's a powerful tool, and then when they work with a scientific board and an ethics board to make sure that, like, everything was in a parameter, and some scientists say, "And check for this and check for that too, just to be safe," we actually build more beautiful protocols than the protocols that I see in clinical trials in the US, and it's at a fraction of the cost. And so I really love what you're doing, and of course, we're with you on this.
Okay, so the way the founder of Immortalis, Mark Hamilton, puts that is Eroom's law, which is the reverse of Moore's law in the tech industry. I'm sure you're aware of it.
Mhm.
Eroom's law is okay. So Moore's law is for every, what is it, $1, you get $10 worth of
Exponential
yeah,
increase.
exponential growth. But Eroom's law in the medical industry is the reverse. So we're trying to flip that back to Moore's law for the medical industry, and it's for people like you. I'm not smart enough to do the science you do, so I want to just help you be able to do what you do faster to save all of our lives. So
Well, thank you,
yeah.
and I have to think I'm on the back of giants, so I would push forward and thank them for anything that we've achieved. I mean, we're patient-centric, we want to help patients get well, we would love to do that in the United States. Since my treatment, my company has never been able to treat another person because we're a US company, and can you imagine how many countries that and companies we've helped in those countries get access to this technology, and yet people here right in the United States can't even get it in their backyard, who desperately need it and actually deserve it.
Yeah, it's a shame, and it needs changed. You're right.
Yeah, land of the free and the home of the brave.
If only.
Why can't we be? Why can't
Right.
we be all of that? It's some of the most beautiful words ever written.
Yes, agreed.
I love this country.
Yes. Well, Liz, thank you for your time. This has been great, and we'll talk a little bit more, I know. So, yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.